Winterberg, Germany, it's time for two-man bobsleigh competition to start once more after the winter break. We are ready for two heats here on this damp and misty afternoon in the Ruhr Valley in Germany. Hello everybody, I'm Martin Haven. Alongside me from the US Bob team, Kurt Tomasevich. And Kurt, for the American sliders, Winterberg's always been a tough nut to crack. What are the keys to this track?
Yeah, this is a very different track than the ones we just experienced in North America compared to Lake Placid especially. The vertical drop is 110 meters, but it's a very slow track at the top. You know, today with the wet conditions, as you see on the POV video here, it's going to be pretty sloppy and a little slippery, of course, even though we are on ice. But through the kink, and then curve 1 of 14 curves that's back into the sled has a tendency to skid, and the driver's going to have to be very careful not to allow that to happen. Curve 2 and 3, still not a lot of speed. It's a very flat part of the track, and it almost feels like you're going uphill as you go into curve 4. Curve 5 starts to drop just a little bit into 6, and curve 7 is what we call Kreisel. Almost a 360-degree curve. Sends you around to a big left. And then curve 8, curve 9 and 10 to the pilots and to the brakeman. It's going to feel like one curve before you come into the labyrinth, which starts with this right-hand curve, curve 11, 12, and finally 13. And then the finish curve, of course, is a little bit uphill, which causes some problems for some drivers, but the finish line there. Track record is at 55.42. Set just a couple years ago by Hefty, who's going to be off second today.
Well, Hefty will go off second here. He lies third in the World Cup standings so far this season. America's Stephen Holcomb with a perfect score, not just in two-man, but in four-man as well. Since the beginning of the Olympic season, he has not failed to finish in the gold medal position. Now, if he can do that here, Kurt, that will be some kind of epic achievement, because this is not, if there's a worst track he's ever been to for him in terms of results, we're at it.
Yeah, I think so. You know, Holcomb just doesn't always have the best of luck here as well. Sometimes the weather plays a factor, but you know, some of our best results are definitely on other tracks.
Well, you need a good start here, and you need a good drive as well. Chris Spring of Canada with Jesse Lumsden behind him will be the first of our 27 sleds down, followed by start monster from Switzerland, Bert Hefty, world champion Francesco Friedrich, Nick Cunningham, Corey Butner and Stephen Holcomb, the USA's podium sweeping trio, come up 4, 5 and 6. Alexander Zubkov for the first time this season with the beast Alexei Vojevoda behind him, showing intent there. What about Oscars Melbardis and Damas Driskins? The Latvians have been on a slow burn this season, haven't shown winning form, but they need to produce a big run here to show that it's still there somewhere.
Yeah, this could be that track with the importance of the start on this track through the first half. Yeah, Melbardis should really do well here.
At the moment, USA, Russia and Germany looking like they will qualify 3 sleds for the Winter Games. What can the Canadians do? Well, Canada having a little bit of a curate's egg of a season. Chris Spring, the best of the 3 drivers. Jesse Lumsden right behind him. Spring, the former Australian athlete, born in Darwin in the Northern Territories, really having a big year this year.
See what their start time is here as they get through the first 50 meters, 5:12. Pretty good start, and it's really hard to compare start to start from year to year on this track, because the weather plays such a factor here. Of course, it's raining right now. That start is slick, but if it gets to be too much water in there, the ice gets a little soft and can slow down a lot. So we'll see how everybody else compares to Spring's 5:12.
Chris Spring, 5:12, good start from him. The record 5:07. So we are getting a quick push with him and Jesse Lumsden, 93 kilometers an hour, and a good tidy exit, just a little bit of a steer at the end of the Kreisel. Quarter 9's been the one that's been causing troubles in training. He has a little skid there, and comes off safe. Late down at the bottom, perhaps a fraction quicker than he was expecting. 128.2 is 79.7 miles an hour, and a 56.66 down time.
We'll see.
Yeah, so the start looks to be pretty quick. We'll find out again with some more sleds come down, but the down time definitely a lot slower than what the track record. We're over a second behind that track record, but again, we'll see how the other sleds fare with that.
Well, this morning's men's skeleton race was a little more like a downhill canoe race, frankly. It was pretty wet and pretty miserable.
Here's that 9-10 section with most pilots will kind of consider that one curve. But you can see Spring came off pretty early and almost kind of skipped that curve 10.
Just a little skid in. It's such a short shoot between 9 and 10. He still managed to get a skid sideways in. So that allows an opportunity for him to tidy up in the second heat. There's something there he knows, you know, no matter what the rest of the run's like, you'll get out cursing the error. Next up for Switzerland, their veteran pusher, Bert Hefty, former Olympic brakeman and now driver. The problem for Hefty has always been getting a Bert Hefty on the back of the sled. It always seems like there's so much power at the front.
Healthy, as he would hope so far this year. He's usually the best brakeman using Alex Bauman. Here they push 5:09, so this is a very fast start. Has a little trouble through controlling that fast start.
When you get through that first nameless corner and turn 1 and 2 can rob you of so much speed. You go uphill through corner 4 here. It looks like they're coming up towards the yard. They crest a rise here and then drop down towards turn 5.
So he's 300s ahead at the start and only 300s ahead at the next split, but extends that to 900s here. So he may not have had the best peak in first and second curve, but he's definitely pulling away here. Okay, now a lot, 2200s ahead.
He's won a few two-man races here. I remember Switzerland going 1-2, him and Gregor Baumann both crashing off the final corner on the last run to go first and second. 1:30.5, that's good speed at the bottom, over 81 miles an hour. And that's a half-second lead over the Springer, so that's a great effort.
Yeah, we expected good things. Beat Hefty was my pre-race prediction winner here, so we'll see how that stands.
You're not going to lose your shirt on a Hefty bet. I don't know how many more years there are in Bert Hefty. He's only 34, but a lot of miles under his belt.
Yeah, he's really, you know, he was kind of one of the pioneers of great brakeman to get into the driver's seat, and it showed with some of his great start times. And he's really learned to become a great pilot as well.
See the ice flying as he slaps the wall a little harder than he was intending. Of course, they trained on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday off, and so the ice on Friday for race day, probably very different. Here's our junior and senior two-man bobsleigh world champion, Francesco Friedrich, winning combination with Janis Becker, and listen to the crowd cheering him on.
Yeah, that's going to help get the adrenaline going. 5:19 start, and that's a little slower than I would expect it for them.
He's from the Altenburg track, so he's not a local for the Winterberg residents, but of course he is a German, he's the world champion, and he won off great start times. Didn't have a great start time there, though, 5:19. Let's see if he can drive into contention.
Years ago, Friedrich, as a driver, actually won the push competition and beat all the brakemen for the German national spot.
23 years old, he'll turn 24 in Sochi if he goes, but he's off the pace at the start and it's following him all the way down the track. 10th away at the top of the bobsled, you should be 3/10 back at the bottom. In fact, he's not got to the bottom, he's already 3/10 back. 1:29, better than Spring, not as quick as the 1:30.5. No Yarvol there.
That was all in the start, really. Again, you mentioned they were 10th back at the start, and a little over 3/10 down at the bottom. And you can't gain any acceleration or speed at the top of the track because it's so flat on that first half.
A little bit of a disappointing first heat for him. 3,700s behind Bert Hefty.
I believe this is the 9-10 combination here, and you can see how close those runners actually get to the top of the track on they get off the ice almost.
It's kind of an older style track here now. The skeleton sliders were way up towards the woodwork. Bobsleds are following. The Cunningham of the USA, first of our 3 US sleds, Justin Olsen behind him. It seems to me, Kurt, from the outside that certainly in terms of muscle power, the US is having its best period of performance for I don't know how long. Men and women's teams are really rocking it.
Yeah, the American teams are on a great streak right now. He's using a combination, of different teams as well, different push athletes. Justin Olsen pushing Nick in two-man this week. Pushing 5:21.
Of course, all the drivers getting used to this new BMW sled, and take a look when you get a rear shot. You see Olsen hanging almost out of the back of the sled. It's a little shorter at the back, the cowling, than a lot of other style sleds. And that very distinct keel there at on the front to send the air around the sled. All good for aerodynamics.
Yep, this sled is, you just mentioned it, built for aerodynamics, not necessarily for comfort. It's pretty small and kind of cramped for the braking in the back of the sled, but you know, if that's what gets us down the hill fast, we'll take it.
Of course, only Stephen Holcomb drove the sled in its first year last year, so all these guys, Cunningham and Corey Butner, who's coming next, learning its tendencies in all sorts of different conditions now.
Yeah, exactly. It's a brand new sled from them. And also one thing for us, you know, we're going from different manufacturers of 2-man to 4-man, so you know, the drivers have to get used to 2 different types of steering.
Yeah.
And you know, that's a game that's just going to have to be played, and it's going to take some experience. And throughout the season, they'll be able to adapt to that.
Talking to Holke last year after first testing the BMW 2-man, he was saying that's the biggest difference. The steering is just so different from what he'd been used to with the Bodines. Now they seem to have got a little bit more customer-friendly.
You can see it's kind of causes a different load for some of the drivers because it's pretty narrow there. And Nick is not a huge athlete, but you know, it's a pretty tight fit for even him.
Well, you know, that's the way it's getting. They're getting smaller and narrower, right down to the restrictions of the rules for the minimum opening at the top. Next up is USA's Corey Butner. Born in Hawaii, lives California, and Charles Barkley behind him. Corey, high school basketball player. And Chuck, that's a lot of Chuck to be fitting in the back of this sled. No wonder you're sitting here smiling.
Yeah, Chuck's he's a tall athlete, 6'4", 6'5" even. And for him to get into this back of this sled, you can see his shoulders wiggle back in there, but you know, that's what it's built for, is aerodynamics.
524 getaway, 300 slower than Cunningham and Olsen. And one of the things, again, looking from the outside and seeing the results, you know, this success that you're all having must be just firing you all up so much confidence.
Yeah, exactly. They're learning from each other. You know, Corey had the fastest runs of the day during, Wednesday's practice. Both runs, he had the fastest 2-man, so you know, that's huge for his confidence. Holcomb and Cunningham can both learn from him. They can share ideas and runner advice as well.
Cameron Brown's of America sled was 5th place at the start. He's up to 4th place. He's closing on 3rd place. He's into 2nd position. 1:30.6, quicker than Bayard Hefty. What a run from Corey Butner. That is great. Off a 5th fastest start, he comes down in 2nd spot behind Bayard Hefty. Gave away pretty much 0.2 of a second at the top, 3,300s down at the bottom. That's impressive.
Yep, that's you know, pretty good lines from Corey, but you know, it's also equipment, sled and runners. He really has a good setup here going for him.
Well, Sochi in Canada last year, 21st start, 6th at the bottom of the track. He finds speed in flat tracks, clearly.
Yep, he's a very underestimated competitor. You know, nobody really expects great results out of him a lot of times, but you know, he's been consistent in 2-man, that's for sure.
And there is Chuck. And yeah, Corey Butner might be signaling a little bit more of what he can do. The Stevens, Holcomb and Langton. Again, Langton, 6'4", 6'5". There's a lot of him to fold into the back of this USA 1 sled. Gets in and out of sight. It almost looks like it's just Holcomb's shoulders in there.
5:18 start time, 900s behind Hefty.
That is a good start. Bayard Hefty really upping the ante here. Couldn't beat Holcomb at the start in North America. There's a few hundreds in hand. Holcomb 15 back as he taps on the way down into corner 5.
It's almost 1/4 second back right now. Hopefully he can reel that in as he gets through Kreisel.
Even to finish in the medals here for Holke will feel like a victory against the track rather than anybody else.
A little bit of a skid coming into curve 11 into the labyrinth.
3rd fastest at the start, 6th position, and it's a little rocky. 1:28.9, 2 kilometers an hour down on Corey Butner. And 6th position run, 56.75 for Steve Holcomb. Looks like the golden run of 2-man races just came to a shuddering halt. with this track, with its flat nature, especially with the softer ice than especially somewhere like Placid, you've got to learn from this.
Yeah, Holcomb always says that this track doesn't have as much feel. You know, you're not driving by feel as much as the other tracks. You don't get that you know, that pressure on a lot of the curves, so you don't know exactly what to steer, and it's, you know, it's not going to play into his favorite, but you know, there's many tracks to come.
Well, Alexander Zubkov with Alexei Voyevoda behind him. Voyevoda, one of the spokesmen for the Sochi track. And Voyevoda famous for his long, flowing Samson locks. Oh, not anymore. Nice short haircut, smart. I almost expected to see him in a suit. First time he's been behind Zubkov, and we've got to anticipate this being Russia 1 for the games. Anything else would be a shock.
Yeah, they've had a lot of success together in the far past, but the recent past they haven't slid together, so it'll be interesting to see how they do here.
They kind of had fallings out. Voyevoda seems to be Russia's bad Hefty. Massive, but with massive ego to go with it. And there are rumours that Vladimir Putin or someone in the office there decided that they need to have their two stars together.
That's tough sport politics that I just really am glad I'm not part of.
Fifth at the start, still fifth. 3/10s back, and at the moment, that leaves him in fifth position. Again, really they can give away race positions here. They're not fast. If it all goes well in February, anything will be forgiven. They can win every gold medal in the World Cup. If it doesn't go well in February, nothing will be forgotten.
Yeah, right now it's, you know, it's almost the attitude that you can leave Hefty alone at the top of the podium right here, but when it comes time for Sochi, that's when it's going to really matter.
Yeah, I mean, today would possibly be a day for testing kit in case it's warm and soft in Sochi. I'm sure they've had plenty of experience of very different weather conditions at the sliding centre in Sankey. But more experience is always more better.
You know, Zubkov definitely one of the best pilots, most experienced pilots. He came from luge as a young kid, and now he's going to be 40 years old at the games. And I don't know if it's going to be quite the oldest pilot, but you know, definitely one of the oldest competitive pilots that's going to be competing for a spot at the top of the track. And that just shows some of his driving ability.
Bad Hefty leads for Switzerland. 3/10s back, Corey Butner, Francesco Friedrich. There's a knife fight going on for the remaining podium positions, but Hefty a step clear. What about Canada's Lyndon Rush? Neville right behind him. Bit of a low burn as well for Lyndon Rush this season. The Eurotech sleds have always proved to be fast in the past, but Lyndon doesn't seem to have really found the golden touch this year.
Yeah, sometimes you have to forget all those yesterdays and focus on today moving forward. He didn't have the best first half of the season, but you know, Lyndon now Canada too. He really wants to catch spring first of all and head into the Olympics and be competitive at the start, and that'll put him in medal contention at the bottom.
32 years old, third quickest starts with him and Neville Wright, 5:18, just 900s behind Ben Hefty.
Together, pretty solid run here. You can't pick apart too many mistakes so far.
2800s back. If he has a good run from the Kreisel down to the finish line, he could end up in second place. Still in fourth. Oh, and a little late there. Labyrinth is so short here. If you go in late, you come off it very late. 56.6.
Tied for fourth place with Nick Cunningham.
Graham Richardson there, and Stefan Bosch, the Canadian coaches. Steve Holcomb in last place at the moment, in 8th of our 8 sleds. Chris Spring 7th, Alexander Zubkov 6th.
Again, Rush put together a pretty good drive down the track. Didn't have it quite as competitive as Hefty at the start, so was at a little bit disadvantaged. A couple small mistakes there, but coming out of 11 into 12.
Just wondering whether everybody has gone with runners for slightly softer ice than we've got today. You have to sort of make your choice the night before and predictamate what the weather is going to be and what the track's going to be like. It doesn't always hit the sweet spot of your setup. Oscar's Melbardis now, this Latvian former brakeman, is one of the hugest pushers in the business. Question is, just 23 years old, where has the push gone this year?
Yeah, you kind of wonder if both athletes here have been healthy all season or why they haven't, but here, okay.
Okay.
Second half of the season, they're starting to put it together. A 5:08 start time, the fastest we've seen so far.
What he needed was some turkey and Christmas pudding, clearly, to really get those juices flowing. The Dauman Streiskins, we expect them to be among the very fastest every time they're on the blocks. Taken away a little bit of that, but he's still a young driver.
What's interesting is they were 100th ahead at the first 50 meters, but at the next split, they were 300ths back of Hefty. So they didn't have that velocity that Hefty had coming in through that first 50 meters.
And again, some of that has got to come down to experience. 4 years ago, in the run-up to Vancouver, he was breaking Yanis Minins in 2 and 4 man. 4 years later, he is the lead Latvian driver.
A little late coming out of curve 12 into 13.
Now you can imagine, once we get to Korea, unless he has some major injuries, with some driving experience to add to all that starting speed, he could be a real weapon.
Yeah, you're right. Staying healthy is a primary focus for Korea, but you know, these guys could be in medal contention in Sochi. They did well in the test event last year, and in fact won the 4-man event.
It is such a flat track, so 3 uphill sections, not 1 like we have here.
So curve 9, 10, very high there, but you know, again, that's the line. There's a lot of teams are going to push that limit to be as high as they can right there. But here was almost a big mistake coming out of curve 13 and into 14.
Everybody seems to be holding it a little late in 13, and again, this is their first taste of the ice in 2 days, so they're finding it perhaps a little difficult to adjust. Germany's Thomas Florschutz with the green of Saxony on it. He's from the Altenburg track, but again, huge roar this afternoon crowd here. Friday in the Ruhr Valley of Germany, really cheering on their boys, and only 600s away at the start.
5:15 start, that's finally starting to get competitive for the German team. So far this season, they just haven't been competitive in the first 50 meters, but they're starting to come in that right direction, and that's what everybody expected. We knew that it wasn't going to remain on the same path it was with the German team pushing 5, 6, and 7th off the hill. They're usually batting for first, second, and third.
Florschutz turns 36 during the games in Sochi, 20th of February. So he's not a spring chicken, but again, he's got that monster Kevin Kuska behind him. One of Andre Langer's not-so-secret weapons. Little wild there. Again, late with the steers.
Yeah, that was one of the worst 9-10s we've seen so far. Almost run the runners up at the exit of 9 and then skid it and actually hit the wall pretty hard all before curve 11.
And still had 128.5 kilometers an hour at the bottom, 79.9 miles an hour. Only 3 or 4 sleds have gone quicker, so he's half a second back in 8th. He could have been in 3rd, perhaps, without those couple of mistakes.
Yeah, at the 4th split, he was in 3rd place, but here you can see curves 9 and 10, very high there. Just misses the edge of the ice. And from a wider angle here, that causes that skid, a couple taps. That's where he lost a lot of time.
So a brakeman has experienced as Kuska is going, oh, come back! Yeah. And trying to cling onto the seat with his butt cheeks to bring it back down. Yeah. Langen, yeah. Mixed emotions for Christoph Langen, the coach, in that run. Yes, no, ooh, ow. Bernd Hefty leads after the first 10 of our 27 sleds go down the hill. Corey Butner of the USA, a strong 2nd place, ahead of world champion German Francesco Friedrich. Young, old, and everything in between out of the track this weekend. Christmas holidays, of course, and that allows everybody to come out on a Friday afternoon. Normally tracks are fairly quiet on a Friday, but there's a good crowd on hand. Plus the rain stopped, so that's nice. They've given up building the arcs for another 24 hours. Yeah,
at least, you know, it's the weather's semi-cooperating today. The rain has kind of diminished a little bit, although it's still foggy and a little misty, and it looks like the clouds could break out more rain at any time.
Well, the crowd in the shelter of this big new finish area was built a few years ago. There's a new outrun, a new finish area, rather, to match the start area that was built a few years ago. You just saw a new finish area here as well. And that's all because the World Championships are coming to Winterberg next year, 2015. February into March. I just had a look at the dates earlier on. It finishes 3rd of March, so it's going to be a long old season.
Yeah, exactly, and I think that's a good move that the FIBT is making, extending the season more into March and maybe less in October, November, just because I think the weather usually cooperates more in March than it does in November. So if you can kind of shift that season a little bit later, I think that's going to make for a a lot more fair races. You don't have to battle the weather conditions.
Yeah, well, you know, it's an outdoor sport, but you hope that the outdoors is at least cooperating a little bit. Unlike skiing, where wind and snow, the things that often make the winter, are a bit of a handicap. It doesn't often have too much of an effect. But remember last year's races with snow blowing up the hill into the start in the two-man race. That had a massive effect on the drivers, the teams that were facing those gusts of wind. FIBT Hefty leading for Switzerland at the moment. Corey Butner, Francesco Friedrich, Nick Cunningham, Lyndon Rush, Alexander Zubkov, Chris Spring, and Stephen Holcomb and Thomas Florschutz are in a 0.2 of a second group battling for the other medal positions. Track is clear here at Winterberg in Germany as we are in the first heat of our two-man bobsleigh race. You can see a constant stream of water running down the track, and Justin Kripps looking even more like a Hudson Bay trapper than I think ever before at the helm of the Canadian sled. Brian Barnett behind him. New names coming into the Canada squad. Barnett clearly really showing himself strongly in pre-season training.
Justin Kripps, a strong push athlete. Pushed for Pierre Lueders at the 2010 Olympics. Jumps into that pilot seat, pushed to 5:13 here, so that's fourth fastest we've seen so far, and pretty competitive. Now it's just a matter of keeping the sled nice and straight through some of these curves and feeling the pressures, having a good run.
Well, for Kripps, it's the same as Melbardis, who we just saw, the Latvian driver, who 4 years ago was a brakeman who just got his head down, put the power into the sled, and went along for the ride. Now he's in his early in his fourth season of driving, and he's aiming for a spot at the Olympics again.
0.4 of a second back here. Much better 9:10 than we've seen from more of our experienced pilots. Florschutz had trouble there, but Justin Kripps putting together a pretty decent run.
Well, that shows
over half a second back.
Yeah, he's coming back now from 11th to 10th place to 10th at the finish, 56.84. And again, there's so little time on these tracks. Even if you're racing two-man and four-man, you probably end up taking no more than a dozen trips down in a weekend in practice and race combined. Then you go away for a year. Some tracks, 2 years or maybe 3 years before you even see it again. So, you know.
Yeah, it's pretty tough because I don't think Justin did the Europa Cup circuit as a younger developing pilot. He did the America's Cup circuit.
So he is into the unknown. See the little wing lip on the back of his helmet, clearly standing out there in black. Obviously they're feeling that'll help deflect some of the airflow around the helmet and around the athlete behind. Cheating the air is so important with these sled and teams. Anything that causes drag is not your friend. Well, next up, Max Arndt and another of the really tall brakemen, Marco Hubenbecker. I think he's got to be the tallest brakeman on tour.
I was just going to say that. He's taller than Kevin Kuske. He's taller than Chuck Berkeley.
He must be 6'6" in his stocking feet. Little wobble through 0 to 1 for Max Arndt.
5:28 push. That's not going to cut it. Those guys really have to drop that start time if they want to be competitive in two-man.
Well, listen, you know, if they took a 10th out of that start, that's a big margin to make up. They'd still be slow. Compared to Hefty, they're 2/10 back. He started 5:09, they're 5:28. I mean, that's a long, long way to give up time.
Yeah, you're not going to come back from a deficit that big at the start.
I'm afraid Max Arndt, 26-year-old policeman from Suhl, where Andre Langer spent so much of his time growing up and still lives. Andre in the commentary booth next door to us, working with German television.
Pretty hard flop coming between curve 13 and 14, and that just makes the, a whipping feeling for the brakeman in the back of that sled.
Well, Max Arndt, with all of his experience and the might of the German operation behind him, 56.84. Justin Kripps, just starting his 4th year as a driver, 56.84. And that alone tells you everything you need to know. They were outstarted handsomely by Kripps and couldn't even drive down quicker than him with all the experience that Max Arndt has got.
Here's curve 13, very high. And when you're very high, that's going to send you pretty hard right before 14. And they didn't take a really hard hit. He recovered fairly nicely, I guess, for as late as he was coming off curve 13.
Yeah, he's got so much more experience in these German tracks, of course. Next up is the Russian Alexander Kasyanov. Kasyanov with Max Belugan behind him. Belugan has spent a lot of the last couple of seasons behind Alexander Zubkov. Now in Russia 2 with Kasyanov.
Teams trying some different combinations of athletes, especially in the four-man races. You know, because teams are also trying to not only compete here and do well, but they're also trying to solidify their Olympic teams. Yeah. And so the back-to-back four-man races that we're going to have tomorrow and Sunday, that's going to give a good opportunity for teams to compare athletes and see what they can find. Yeah,
very difficult to compare them at different tracks. If you start with roughly the same weather in the same track, that'll be good. 13th at the start, still in 13th place. It's unusual, to say the least, to have two races on the same weekend. That's going to put a lot of pressure on the bodies of you guys in the four-man crews.
Yeah, especially for the brakemen that are racing today. If they're going to race tomorrow and Sunday, all the four-man races as well, you know, that's 3 days of being in the back of the sled. You know, the pilots do it every day, and you know, they're a little more accustomed to doing that, so their bodies are adapted. But the push athletes, a lot of times we train once during the week, go hard a four-man day, and then they have one race day. And so to go 3 days in a row for some athletes, it's gonna pay a little bit of a toll.
Well, consistent drive from Kasyanov, 13th at the start, 13th at the bottom. Gave away 2100s. 3 times that would be 60 hundredths. He came down 88 hundredths back. So he was losing ground all the way.
Here he drifted to his left right away, and that might have set him up a little bit too early for that kink. As you see, as he came around here from curve, let's see, 4 into 5, I believe that is. You know, that sent him to his right there as well. So not the best drive. Maybe left a few things undone there.
Maxim Belugan, you saw there, walking back in as Ivo de Bruyne and Yannick Greiner come to the top of the track for the Netherlands. And this has always been a very happy hunting ground for Dutch crews. Can't tell you the number of times they've put in top 6, top 4 medal positions, sealed Olympic qualifications. I mean, it just seems to be the happy hunting ground. And this area of Winterberg, lots of Dutch holiday makers here as well, so plenty on hand to watch out. 5:24, not the quickest of starts.
Now, in addition to the international qualification that teams have to meet in order to get to the Olympics, the Dutch have their own national qualification too, and I think that includes a top 8 or a top 10 finish. I'm not sure which. Ivo has not met that yet, so he really is looking to do well on this track. So close to the Netherlands. If he can get into that position and solidify a spot at the Olympics, you'll see him celebrate pretty hard down here.
Yeah, definitely. He's their development driver. 11th fastest at the start. He's 13th place now, ahead of Alexander Kasyanov.
But falling back pretty quickly.
Yeah. Edwin van Calker is the #1 Dutch driver, and Ivo really only made his World Cup debut at the end of last season. He's been racing Europa Cup. 14th place, 57, 1-7, 1300s, 9th place, Kasyanov. Started out being tutored by Graham Richardson, who's now, of course, working with the Canadian setup. Arndt Glass there at the back, helping out with the coaching duties, former Dutch driver as well.
Again, that 9-10, he's coming off 9 a little bit more, well, a little early compared to a lot of our drivers. Sent him into a skid the opposite way of what some have experienced. And then curve 13-14. These are the same spots we seem to talk about each run. None of the pilots so far have really dialed that combination in.
There's Ivo. Yannick Greiner, one of the regular stalwarts of Dutch bobsledding. As is Francesco Costa for the Italians, behind Simone Bertazzo here. Antonio Tartaglia on the right-hand side at the back. Former Olympic brakeman, and of course, they have their coach as well, another former Olympic athlete. Plenty of knowledge. And with Ferrari engineering going into their sled as well, you might expect a little bit more of a radical look. It certainly looks smooth and new. Is it going to be quick though?
It takes a few years to dial in great equipment. You know, any sled can be brand new, but that doesn't mean it's fast. You have to make a lot of adjustments throughout the course of a number of races in order to dial in a fast sled and find the right runner setup and right spring stiffness. And that just takes a lot of time.
Wolfgang Stampfer has been building his own sleds for years, so I'm sure he's had input into the sled as well.
Stampfer always known for having great equipment and a pretty decent driver, of course, not to take anything away from him, but everybody always said that whatever team he's coaching or is working with, they're going to have great equipment, great runners.
Look at the speeds as well, 129.1 off a fairly average start, so it shows again that the aerodynamics, the wind tunnel work is going well. I'm not sure I'm really going along with the ponytail look with Wolfgang Stampfer there, a little bit too Francis Rossi, late 90s status quo look. It's not working well. Second Italian sled in the field, by the way, for the first time in a long while.
There you can see steering pretty hard coming out of curve 4 and into 5. 13-14, really high there. This is the woodwork, but takes that tap. You see the ice flying up in the air. Not a comfortable position for a brakeman in the back of that sled, but whatever's fast, we'll take.
Yeah, whatever's fast you put up with. Nobody likes it, but you have to deal with it. These things are built for speed and definitely no thought of comfort. Bernd Hefty leads comfortably here in our first heat with Corey Butner, Francesco Friedrich, and the host of thousands all battling for the other podium spots. And next up is Frenchman Loic Kosteg, Roman Heinrich behind him. Kosteg started in the World Cup last season and has produced some very impressive results with not a great deal. Sled built by Bruno Mijon, he's not officially the French coach. Very bumpy there through corner 0 and corner 1 though. Yeah, that corner 0 we like to call kink. That's crucial to keep your start velocity as you go into the first curve. If you have the fastest start on the hill, you're not going to keep any kind of supersonic speed if you can't handle that first kink. 92 kilometers an hour, the quickest, a full kilometer an hour quicker.
Little tap coming out of Kreisel into curve 8. 0.7 of a second back. It's quite a distance right here.
Slowest run in the field at the moment. He's 16th of our 27 sleds. And crucially for him, only the fastest 20 go into the second heat. So 7 will not get a second run. And if you're down at the bottom of the pile, 15 to 20 region, you are always in danger.
That's always a sad feeling if you're one of those 7 that have to pack your sled up and head home early.
The French Canal Plus network have finally cottoned on to the fact that they have a team, and oh yes, there's that Olympics thing coming up in February, so there's a camera crew here following the crew around.
Now you can tell when the push athlete loaded into the sled, he kind of dipped in one hand and then the other. And you can see that caused the back of the sled to skid just a little bit, and that could have been the cause of that rough kink action.
You can see the mountings on the front of the sled. You can see the scratches on the back as well. That's from the spikes.
That might have been why the brakeman loaded into the sled so gingerly. You realize I have a foot in the back of my pilot, and I need to be a little more careful jumping in. But you know, again, we keep talking about how big some of these push athletes are and how small the sled is. So sometimes that happens.
Switzerland's #2 bobsleigh driver, Rico Pater. Thomas Amrein, newcomer to the Swiss program this season in World Cup. And a 5:23 getaway. Again, when your benchmark is your teammate, Bernd Hefty, 5:09. Shows the rest of the Swiss that they have some way to go.
0.3 of a second behind Hefty already. That number's going to grow quite a bit as he comes from curve 4 to 5.
He's 1,400 slower with the push. Yeah, the big bang as he taps the wall as well.
Yeah, a lot of noise coming from this sled. I don't know if the microphones on the track are turned up, but for whatever reason, this seems like a louder sled than some that we've seen go by.
These Swiss sleds, in the build-up to the last games in Vancouver, started adopting this pointed front, the keel shape. Very distinctive shape. They've got 2 distinct aerodynamic brakes on the sled in the center and then at shoulder height. And that's all about tailoring the airflow around the sled to try and stop it spilling over the driver's head and over the brakeman.
And if you look really quickly around the cowling, you can see kind of a bump right where the driver's armpits and hands are right now.
Yeah.
And that's also to try to help the airflow go around the pilot's and brakeman's shoulders as they come by. And you can see this is kind of a good line to see that. You want that air to flow and kind of split the top and go right around nice and smoothly over the brakeman's back.
The longer you can keep the airflow attached to the sled before it spills out into drag at the back, the better it is. We saw Coach Eric Allard, a former French driver, at the top of the track. Down at the bottom, this new artificial surface, it's like ice, it slides, but when you're walking on it, it's not like ice, it doesn't slide.
Yeah,
I love it.
It's very interesting. Sometimes it's hard to slide a sled when it's on inside there, but you know, if the conditions are right, it works perfectly. But
works well in the rain.
Pros and cons, yeah, exactly.
Next up then, our 18th of 27 sleds. This is Romania's Nicolae Strati with Florin Crăciun behind him. Raced only once in World Cup last year, came to Lake Placid at the end of the season, then did the Sochi event as well, so twice then, strictly, and did the World Championships, I beg your pardon, didn't come to Lake Placid, did World Championships in St. Moritz, and then did Sochi. So he's been racing in Europa Cup in Europe, less travel, less cost, still lots of ice miles.
Yeah, it's an expensive sport. We just talked about how loud Rico Peters' sled was. This sled might be the oldest sled on the hill, and you can hear all those vibrations in that sled really echo through the track.
18th at the start with a 5.34, so he's going to be doing well to finish in the top 20. Vignette speeds up to 124 at the bottom, and he's got a chance. Oof, clump, clump.
Yeah, when you're a quarter of a second back at the start, you really can't come back and make a competitive finish at the bottom of the hill.
I said 124 meant 129. Not a bad speed at the bottom, 129.5, 80.5 miles an hour. But with that start deficit, always going to be hard to find momentum that you didn't leave the top of the hill with. So he is in 18th of 18. Just to remind you, only 20 go through into Heat 2. Well, that's a very apposite little comment.
You see the sled bouncing off the ice at the hill, and the brakeman really gets whipped pretty hard, sitting up pretty high as he comes through there. You know, being in the low aerodynamic position is not comfortable when you're getting beat up like that in the back of the sled. So maybe the
Nicolae Strati with a get well Schumacher little note on his hand. Clearly a racing fan. Michael Schumacher in hospital, of course, in a fairly critical condition after a skiing accident. It's his 45th birthday today. Let's hope that he has many better birthdays in the future. Our best wishes to him. Meanwhile, for Great Britain, Lamindine with John Baines behind him. And Lamindine getting a better start draw than teammate John Jackson.
Really early into kink, had trouble controlling that. And I don't know if the brakeman ran it maybe too deep, but something funny kind of happened as he loaded into the sled there.
Got a bit of a bump up onto the wall, and that is never good news.
Yeah, and it's tough when your start time is 5:27, so you're looking for every advantage you can, try not to make any mistakes at all. And it's tough when you have a mistake in curve 1, curve 0 actually already.
From 15th start, he's down to 19th place behind Nicolae Strati. Mindine, a guardsman in the British Army. It's only his second season on World Cup, didn't do the full World Cup tour last year. So still very much a development driver. Ahead of John Jackson and the points, because Jackson's been struggling so badly with his torn muscles. 125.9 down at the bottom. There's Coach P. Gunn on the right. 19th place. And he will be fortunate, I think, to make a second heat off that. And that's one of the tough things with the younger drivers, is that first of all, you've got to make the cut before you even get a second heat in the race.
Yeah, and it's really hard because you are competing against some guys that are competing on the Europa Cup circuit, so you're not even head-to-head with some of the guys you're trying to compete with to make the Olympic spot. But yeah, you can see John Baines in the back of that sled, loads in very sideways, gets his left hand caught up. And again, once you do that and you come out of those grooves, out of the drive lines, it makes the sled tough for the pilot to steer. And as he came into kink, he really couldn't control the back end of that sled. Had a skid right away.
Well, there's Lamin. You saw how much he bumped that first corner because he got up out of the seat. Day job, he guards the Queen. Not many people can say that. Edwin van Calker and Sybren Jamsma. This is the #1 Dutch team, at least on paper and historically. Their Eurotech sled, they start 20th of our 27 sleds.
And just like Iver de Bruin with the Dutch program, he needs a top 10. He's already got a top 10 in 4-man. I think he got that last race in Lake Placid. But he really wants to do that here in 2-man as well. Pretty good start time, 5:23.
11th start time, 11th at the moment. A little wiggle going down to turn 4, or going up through turn 4, rather.
So he's still in 11th place, now falls back to 16th place at the moment. That's going to be hard to qualify in that top 10 spot.
It's costly enough when you make mistakes downhill. When you make mistakes uphill, they really come back to bite you. 18th place. He may struggle to make the field at a track that has so often seen him qualify for the Olympics or finish really, really strongly.
Yeah, he's going to be over a second back here, I think, when he crosses the finish line. That's going to put him in danger of not being in the top 20.
Horrible speed, 126.5. Where are the 129s and 130s? Ivo Danilevich, the coach on the right, shakes his head. Edwin van Calker shakes his head as well.
That's tough to see the Dutch program have trouble here in two-man at least, and of course 2 4-man races to come. But you know, good guys, and we always like to see the Dutch do well, but it doesn't seem to be their day so far.
Yep.
Curve 11 into, 11 into 12 there. Seems fairly smooth. 13, maybe a little high. Right there, it takes the tap on his right. Not at the same time, you know, if you take a tap and both bunks hit the wall at the same time, at least your sled is going straight, but there it hit the front and then the back, and that could cause a skid.
20 sleds down, the race is full. Time now for the remaining 7 to go fast or go home. First up, Austria's Benny Meyer. His brother Raf raced earlier today in the men's skeleton race with a Wolfgang Stamfer-built sled. Their dad is the coach of the team as well. On the start, 5:22. Seen a lot better, but we've seen worse as well. So 11th quickest at the start. Can he keep that speed on board? Next couple of corners will tell us.
Not a lot of speed at the top. Slowly falling back, 4/10 now. 92.7 kilometers an hour.
Little wave through the Kreisel. Clean exit, little skid though. And again, another big skid. So he's gone 11th, 12th, 14th place.
Yeah, that's going to cost him. I think he's going to fall back even more places.
Now he is starting to look like a young teenager rather than a veteran. It's just getting in front of him a little. Still got better speed than we saw from Lamin Dean, and he's in the race in 19th. Dean is out. Tied with Van Calker. So they will both stay in or both go out in one fell swoop. Wow, that's going to be tough.
Yeah, that's not bad for a 19-year-old kid, though. You know, you mentioned his brother was doing skeleton earlier today.
Yeah, it's a real sliding family.
Yeah, here going into Kreisel, you can see that that rough exit, how the back of the sled whipped up pretty high. Another view of the same motion. And once you get that high, it's hard to control the sled and keep it from waving as you go through that, again, almost 300-degree curve.
Well, with no sign of Jürgen Loacker, this 19-year-old from Rum is the only Austrian hope of going to the Games. Jürgen Loacker retired at the end of last season, so it's all on Benny Meyer's shoulders. Now, Yevgeny Paskov makes his World Cup debut. Dmitry Stepushkin, how many drivers has he nursemaided in on their debuts? Stepushkin is your go-to man for the young pilots to teach them the ropes.
When I first got started in sport and I made the 2006 Olympic team, people talked about how that would be Stepushkin's very last Olympics. And here he is 8 years later, still pushing on the World Cup circuit. Not a great start, 5:29, one of the slowest starts we've seen so far, but still being able to be on the back of that sled, that just says something how great of an athlete he has been throughout his career.
Yeah, it still means he's the 3rd best pusher that Russia have at his age, so you can't argue with that. And, you know, the tantalizing prospect of having a home Olympic Games kept so many British athletes going to London 2012, has kept these Russians going, and I'm sure, you know, that the same when Salt Lake came up, everybody wearing an American uniform was desperate to get there.
Yeah, I believe that's the same story for, you know, Brian Scheimer for 2002, for Pierre Lueders in 2010, and Alexander Zubkov for 2014. Everybody wants to compete on their home track, and that, you know, gives you that desire to make your career last just a few more years.
57.21. He is in and on the bubble now. Van Calker and Meyer. Lamin Dean is out, 22nd place. Edwin van Calker and Benny Meyer are joint 20th. So again, as Paskov makes it in, he has to push somebody else out.
There's a great view of how soft the ice is today. Kind of warmer temperatures than what we experienced in Lake Placid and Park City. And causes the ice to be just a little softer and gets torn up just a little bit more as the competitors step in the same places going down the hill.
It's like racehorses chewing at the turf, isn't it? So, 22 sleds down. Next up, Great Britain's John Jackson with Bruce Tasker behind him. And step one will be to get this GB sled into the top 20. Lamindine, their teammate, already bumped. He will take no further part. Jacko still really struggling from this summer injury.
Yeah, in four-man, it's a little bit easier for a pilot to hide an injury.
Oh, and that's horrible.
Gosh, just bad luck everywhere for John Jackson so far this year.
And he needs to get some good results, not just to prove to himself that he's still got the feel, that he's still got the touch. You want to be as far up the order as you can. First of all, to be the best scoring GB sled. And secondly, to try and get your nation as high up in the points as possible. It all helps with where your start draw is for the Olympic Games.
Yeah, that crushed him right away. You know, 17th rank at the first 50 meters, but that hit right before kink causes him to be in last place right now, and I don't think he's going to be able to recover from that way back right now. It just happened immediately. There's not much he can do.
Horrible slide there as well. Got almost broadside onto turn 9, and just late at the bottom. 1.6 seconds back, 125 kilometers an hour. Across the line, 78 miles an hour compared to the 81 we've seen of the fastest sleds. He is at the tail of the field.
You know, hopefully he can just keep his head up. You know, it's going to be hard for the first few moments, but once he realizes that four-man is going to be Saturday and Sunday. Last week they won a silver medal in four-man, excuse me, last race. Brakeman very early and hits it by himself. John Jackson late getting to the bar. That causes the brakeman to lift the sled up. Looks like it was out of the grooves for a little while. And sometimes by the time you realize what happens, you try to overcompensate, maybe run the sled a little too deep, cause them to come out of the grooves. Just nothing went right for them in those first 50 meters, and they couldn't recover the rest of the way down the track.
Well, there is Bruce, and there is Jacko. Not much to say about that one, other than go again tomorrow in the four-man. Next up, another World Cup rookie and a new Italian name, Patrick Baumgartner, with Samuele Romanini, a regular four-man brakeman on the back of the other Italian sled.
Yeah, we actually haven't seen Romanini for about a year and a half, 2 years. It was great to see him at the top of the track this week. And, you know, we asked how his health was and how he was doing, and he said, you know, he's just here to try to help a young pilot gain some experience, kind of like Pushkin was doing with the young Russian pilot, and to try to help him along, get them off to a good start.
The sled looks just the same as we've seen from the #1 Italian team. So it looks like they've got another classy bit of kit. And then you could give me the fastest sled and I wouldn't know what to do with it. He's got to learn, and that takes time.
Not a bad run so far, pretty good 9-10 where we saw some pilots struggle. But again, quite a ways back at the start.
Yeah, 5:46 start. And at the moment he's in 23rd place, 22nd ahead of both Great Britain sleds on his debut. Doesn't make the second heat. But he's beaten Lamindine and John Jackson, both of whom have got more experience. 2 more sleds still to come, 3 more sleds still to come, in fact. So Edwin van Calker and Benny Meyer tied for 20th, may not be safe yet.
Pretty good exit into Kreisel that you saw there, and here coming from 13-14. You know, just some small mistakes added up for the young pilot. Not a great run, but you know, overall not too bad.
Next up is David Kupczyk of Poland, Paweł Moroz behind him. Moroz is the Polish for Chile, apparently. A particularly suitable name for a bobsled brakeman. David Kupczyk, you've got to wonder if he's going to continue by Sochi. He's had a string of injuries over the series of years that he's been competing. Now 36 years old. Calker, old bodies take longer to recover from everything.
Absolutely. You know, he's been a consistent pilot. I won't say a consistently good pilot, but you know, he's had some consistent runs throughout his career. Never had a really great start. It doesn't seem to have really great equipment, and so that equation just doesn't equal success a lot of the time. So, you know, it's going to be interesting to see where the Polish program is headed if David Kupchak does not continue on for 2018.
Well, Maciej Lutti, who raced for them in World Cup last year as Poland 2, hasn't come out in the World Cup so far this season. So, yeah, it's a small federation, a small little group of athletes. And certainly if David Kupchak leaves, imagine his father Martin might also decide to hang up his coaching hat, but suddenly there's almost nothing left.
Yeah, pretty rough bottom half of the track here for David. Had a pretty rough transition from 9-10 into 11, as well as that curve 13 into 14, pretty hard tap.
57.59 into 22nd place. There's his dad and coach. And that means that Edwin van Calker and Benny Meyer are safe in joint 20th. But we still have Oskars Viessmann of Latvia and Jan Verber of the Czech Republic, both of whom are capable of a top 20 spot.
Yeah, Viessmann, who we're going to see next, is going to have a great start time, so it's just a matter of whether he can hold that together. There was that 9-10 curve from David Kupchak. From curve 12 into 13, too.
Kupchak is out. What about Oskars Viessmann, another former brakeman, former decathlete? Huge fan of AC/DC as well. Well, why wouldn't you be? Everybody is. Now just 20 years old. So not old enough to hire a car at the airport, but plenty fast enough to drive 80 miles an hour on ice.
The Latvian program right now, definitely known for their great starts.
Another new brakeman, Vairis Leiboms, on the back of the sled. He's new to the program this year. Bounce up off the wall, but off the third fastest start, you can afford to make a mistake or two.
5:10, that's incredible. Only 100th behind Hefty.
Yeah.
And just 200ths behind, behind his teammate Melbardis at a 5:08.
Well, listen, yeah, his teammate Melbardis just 200ths in front. Neither of them are exactly what you call old in the tooth. Neither of them exactly what you call experienced drivers. This is Oskars Viessmann's second year as a driver in World Cup.
Definitely has a long way to go as a driver, though. Already 4/10ths back after being only 100th back at the start. So he lost that start velocity, and now he's just trying to hold it together.
This could be the sled that bumps out Van Calker and Meyer from joint 20th place, and he does. 12th place run, third at the start, 12th at the bottom. Hard to argue with that. And best of the Latvians.
Interesting, yeah.
Started by Melbardis by 200ths. He outdrove Melbardis to finish 300ths quicker. He turned over a 500ths advantage over Melbardis.
Melbardis definitely had a rough transition from 9-10, as well as 13-14. And here you can see Viessmann takes that tap coming out of 13. Every sled will probably take a tap. It's whether you can keep the sled straight and minimize the distance between the curves.
Listen, he irons out one tiny error. He's a top 10 pilot in his second season of World Cup racing. And that's some potential for the future, beyond career. Last of our 27 sleds, Jan Verber of the Czech Republic, Jan Stuklaska behind him. We talk about veteran brakeman Samueli Romanini, Dimitri Stepushkin, Francesco Costa. Here's another one, Jan Stuklaska. I think he was braking in 2000 when I first started getting into this sport. Singer-built sled, so good kit.
Little tough controlling the kink right there. You know, sometimes it's a roll of God's dice, whether you can have a good setup and keep that control. Sometimes it's just luck.
Well, the more aggressive you go with the runner setup, the less of a contact patch you have, better it is for speed. Worse it is for control when you really need it in a heartbeat, like between the start and corner 0 and corner 1. 7800s back, he's in 24th place, so he's not going to trouble the top 20 from here. Again, the Czech Republic, such a tiny team. This is it, essentially, in World Cup terms. We've got 2 4-man races to get through tomorrow as well.
Brinkman really bouncing the back of that sled. And this is the 27th sled. Sometimes that ice gets pretty choppy and rough.
Especially when it's verging on being a little soft as it is here. No rain so far this afternoon, which is very good news. Bad news for Jan Verber is he is not in the race. 24th place. Bad news for Team Great Britain is that 26th and 27th are the 2 GB sleds, the last 2 sleds in the field.
You can see all the lines from the sleds that have gone down prior to this one, cut into the ice, and that makes for a choppy feeling.
It's a rough ride all round. They're joint 24th with the Italian rookie Patrick Baumgartner, and they will join the sleds that go home. Van Calker, Meyer, Kupchik, Baumgartner, Verber, Dean and Jackson will not get a second heat. Fast 20 go through and they'll all be setting off trying to catch Bert Hefty and Alex Baumann, our race leaders. 3300s clear of second place. Can he hold on to a third of a second advantage without dramas? Or will the track slow down and bring the field closer? Only one way to find out. Stay with us for the second and deciding heat of the men's 2-man bobsleigh competition here in Winterberg. Well, there is the gap from first to second, and then the huge bun fight for the other podium positions from 33 to 5200s back, 1800s of a second, covers second to 8th spot. All or any of them could be among the medals. And Holcomb from 9th place, if he gets in the medals, he will be a very happy man going into tomorrow's 4-man first race. And it's Yevgeny Paskov and Dmitry Stepushkin, the Russian rookie Paskov, 20th place, who'll be first off the hill in the 20 down to 1 second heat. And the remaining 7 sleds, I'm afraid, will be packing up and beginning their recuperation and preparation for the first of 2 4-man races this weekend that happen Saturday and Sunday. My thanks to the FIBT TV crew for all the coverage here. Thanks for you for joining. Stay with us. Kurt Tomasevich and myself, Martin Haven, we will be back. Second heat gets underway here at 4:30 Central European time in just 27 minutes from now. Stay with us.